First of all, I am so happy to be here, and I hope I don't cause any indigestion. But this does beat talking at a funeral or something like that, so I'm not going to get upset. Let me begin, and I'm not going to stay up here. I'm going to kind of engage with you. I'm just going to get us going here. What I want to do is really begin by giving you a little background. I've been at Cisco for 22 years, and yeah, that's me. And I represent the office and the chairman of Cisco, who's probably one of the more recognizable business leaders. And the only reason I'm telling you that is I get to do a lot of really interesting and cool things that I probably, if I didn't work for him and I didn't work at Cisco, I'd never get the opportunity to do. And I keep sitting in these environments waiting for somebody to tap me on the shoulder and go, Mr. Dominguez, what are you doing here? So I'm not that smart, but when you get exposed to a lot of things, what it really does, it gives you kind of a way of seeing the world that is very different. So what I'm going to try to do with you today is two objectives. The first one, I'm trying to win you over, so this isn't a really good thing for me to tell you. But what I want to do is I want to make you feel uncomfortable. What do you think I want to make you feel uncomfortable? What's the purpose of doing that? For what? Change. What else? Perspective. It's really about really making you learn the most. Remember when you got notified on Friday that you have a new job and you show up on Monday? You got those butterflies, all your senses are going, and everything else. That's when you're learning. Then 6 months later, you're walking down the hall, time to do something different inside the company because you've learned everything of that job. So I'm going to try to make you a little bit uncomfortable. The second thing I want to do, which was already mentioned, is change your perspective. I want to change the way you see the world. Two very, very big things to do here with you in the next 45 minutes, but that's what I'm going to attempt to do. So what I've labeled my talk is really this notion of this new world in which we're living in, which has a new set of rules, and what impact is it going to have on pediatric health care. And it's really about this hyperconnectivity that we're dealing with. I want to begin with the notion that I think it's an amazing time to be alive. I think with what we experience day in and day out, especially people in the IT field that I talk to all the world, I look them in the eye and you see that, that look of craziness in them because it's really, really difficult to try to keep up. But if you walk away from that for a moment and you just think about the great things that are happening all around us, which I will talk about and you've been hearing probably already today, it's an amazing time to be alive. If you just take a step back and you look at the progress that we as humanity have had over the last 100 years, it's absolutely incredible. The first one I think is something you care about. Average human lifespan has increased twofold in the last 100 years. Average per capita income has increased threefold. Childhood mortality has been decreased by tenfold. Right? Are we there yet? No. But boy, these are pretty good stats. And really, as you think forward, what's the next 100 years going to be? And I think it's going to make the last 100 years seem like we didn't do anything. Because I think we have the opportunity to change everything. So what I'm going to do with you here over the next 30, 40 minutes is really try to work with you on giving you a blueprint on how to look at the world. And a blueprint that'll give you a little bit of an understanding about what's ahead. And you've already have received a lot of that information, but we'll give you another way of looking at it. So we're going to cover it in 5 very distinct buckets. We'll talk a little bit about the world today. We'll talk a little bit about some of the new rules that are emerging. Since this is an innovation conference, I figured let's talk about innovation. Some best practices. As the guy who's trying to push innovation inside a big organization, I can tell you it's hard. I used to be 6'5" and really good looking. Look at me now. That was before innovation. So I want to share some of those scars with you and give you some of the best practices. And then I want to talk about some of the technologies and trends to watch. I did a lot of research on all the stuff that the hospital's already putting out there as predictions. So I tried not to do mainstream stuff. I picked some things that are a little bit odd, but it might be fun to do. And then some closing thoughts. So let's kick it off with characteristics of the new world. So the first question or point that I want to make is technology and connectivity are the game changers. Right? Make no bones about it. And that connectivity is really changing everything. If you think about 99.9% of our world, we have lived in a local environment. You were born, you lived, and you died within a 30-mile radius. That's how humanity was. Things that happened 31 or 32 miles didn't matter unless you were being conquered. And all of a sudden, we've gone very global, we've hyper-connected. There's nothing that happens anywhere in the world that within seconds we're all aware of it. Right? And that's really changing the dynamics. We're connected, we're contributing, and we're collaborating. And those 3 C's are fundamentally changing everything about society and humanity. So let's kind of explore some of the forces that this connectivity and the technologies really bring to us. So I have a question for you. How many of you think the world is moving at a comfortable pace? Raise your hand. Give me one so we can all boo and hiss at you. Not even one. Oh, we got one over there. All right, everybody, turn this way. Boo, hiss. So let's put things into context for you. If we look in the rearview mirror, in the last 25 years, we have had the birth of 3 major technologies: the internet, mobile technology, and social. 25 years ago, we didn't have that, right? And now it's such a part of the fabric of our everyday lives, right? As a matter of fact, it's so entrenched in what we do that 53% of you in this room suffer from a disease called nomophobia. What's nomophobia? What is it? Having no phone, the fear of being out of cell phone range or not having battery power. How many of you suffer from nomophobia? Raise your hand. Okay, and those of you that didn't raise your hand, you're lying. Okay, I know this trick. The other thing, too, is we as human beings are connected so well that we have power unlike ever before. It doesn't take much to think about everything that has happened with the, all the revolutions going on, but people feeling connected and they're congregating and doing all sorts of things. The other thing is distance is dead. You know, we're no longer confined by this thing called space and being in a place, right? We can be anywhere, anytime, and with the technologies like what we're doing, this is the only Cisco commercial comment I'm making, so I apologize. But videos like this are really changing the world. And one of the examples I want to share with you, so here I am last night. You can see I'm tired. It's 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'm doing a presentation to a team in India. So it's got its good and its bad. I'm constantly connected, and I don't have to travel to India. But here I am at 1 o'clock. My wife and I have a routine normally. She'll, the alarm rings at 2 in the morning. She goes, Carlos, where are you going? I say, oh, I'm going to India. She goes, okay, honey, have a good trip. So I take off my pajama tops, put a shirt on, and I keep my bunny slippers, though. I do keep that. So I go down the hall. I connect. I do my thing, and take off my pajamas, my shirt and thing, put my pajamas on. And it's always the same routine. She goes, how was your trip? And I said, honey, it was great. No traffic. Boom, and back to bed. But it's changing everything. And the notion is these technologies, all of us are hyper-connected, constantly connected. So much so that I recommend that we kind of modify Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I propose that we add Wi-Fi to the base. God forbid we're not connected. Knowledge, totally democratized. Totally democratized. 9 years ago, one of my daughters was diagnosed with leukemia. And good story, happy story. It's not a sad story. Just had a baby, and we got through it. But it was interesting when I first met with the doctor and started querying him about AML and what translocation and going through all the detail. The doctor said to me, are you a doctor? And I said, no, I have an internet. It really is affording us the opportunity to have knowledge on tap anytime and anywhere. These folks, which many of you are in the audience, first generation that lived in this hyper-connected world, they operate differently. Just see them do things. I remember my 21-year-old who was then 15 wanted to have a party, and I kept nagging her with her mom, like, how many people are coming to the party? How many people are coming to the party? And finally I said, either you tell me or you're not going to have a party. She goes, all right, Dad. She goes on her computer and leaves me for 5 minutes later. She comes back, it'll be 32. I said, how do you know? Well, I put it up on Facebook, and they all responded. I was like, oh, my God. Oh, my God. That's what we're dealing with. And if you think this generation is pretty crazy, just wait until this generation comes in. Right? I have an 8-month-old grandson who sees an iPhone and goes, he's converted. Just give him the iPhone, and he'll be fine. Right? How do they learn to operate? Right? Apple has changed their operating system. So all of these things that we're experiencing, the forces that are all based on this thing called connectivity and technology, are really setting a new set of rules. It's a different world. It's a totally different world than the one I grew up with. And I don't care what business you're in. There's not one single industry that I have talked to over the last 3 or 4 years that has said, no, my life is great. Nothing, oh, we're doing the same thing we've been doing for the last 100 years. It doesn't exist. Everybody's being rebooted. And we're at a turning point, you know, in history. And how we handle the change is really going to be very important. If you think of healthcare, it's one of the markets that I think is going through profound change for a lot of different reasons. Now, here's the bad news. The bad news is that the longevity of companies has been decreasing for a while. The average lifespan of a company in the S&P 500 has gone from 67 years in 1920 to 15 years today, according to Richard Foster. And that's a pretty bad news story. Now, the worst news is the one that follows that says that by 2020, 75% of the S&P are going to be companies we haven't even heard of yet. And if you don't believe me, you know how many people knew Alibaba 5 months ago? And now they're $213 billion. That's the way of the world. And the other thing that's quite interesting, I spend a lot of time in Silicon Valley and with the venture world and hearing a lot about startups. And it's amazing from the moment that people say, I've got an idea, how much little time it's taking before they're running a billion-dollar company. Right? It's amazing. And you can see it over and over with, you know, a lot of companies that have gone through that cycle. Right? We've gone from small to very, very large at an all-time increasing rate with incredible amount of power. Here's a sign of the times. The same month that Kodak filed for bankruptcy, and I cried. I cried. I was at Disney World, and you have a Kodak moment spot where you want to take a photo that's pretty obsolete. They filed for bankruptcy, right? They invented personal photography. Instagram gets bought by Facebook for $1 billion. They're 18 months old, and there's 15 people in the company. Old and new. I print this slide, and I have it in front of me every single day as a reminder. So this is troubling for me, and it's got to be troubling for each and every single one of you. Right? Existing successful companies have incredible assets. You know, they've got great customers. They got products and services. They got a decent business model. They've got money. They've got people. They've got a recognizable brand, yet they're not making it. So my question to you is, why are they failing? Why are they failing?
They don't adapt.
They don't adapt. Bingo. I'm taking you on the road with me. What else? What else? Business model expired. What else? Anybody else? Lack of innovation. You're all right. You're all correct in what you're thinking about it. Richard Foster, in his book Creative Destruction, which is kind of an eye-opening book, he basically talks about successful companies that have longevity balance 3 imperatives. They manage running operations effectively, which, by the way, there's not one single publicly traded company, nor is there a hospital that is, there are some, but most hospitals and most publicly traded companies are very efficient, because if not, they will replace the team, right? That's kind of entry into the kingdom. The second thing he talks about is you got to understand and meet the customer needs, and you got to remain in sync with the environment. That's about innovation. It's a little bit harder to do. The third one is about getting rid of things that are no longer applicable. I can tell you, working for a high-tech firm, boy, it's really hard to kill products that are no longer appropriate. Every time we're going to do away with something, somebody says, whoa, wait a minute, we have one customer in Iowa who's using that thing, and if you do it, we're going to anger them. So we end up keeping the product. And what you end up doing is you don't shed the businesses that are no longer applicable to take that money, resources, and smarts and be able to apply it to the new innovative things you need to do. It's a challenge. Doing all of those 3s are really, really hard. So let's talk about operations. Delivery requires short-term thinking, process and structure, stability. You got to execute, you got to drive results, and you don't want any risk. What does it take to be innovative? Take risk. Okay, diametrically opposed. What else? Think long-term. All right, play the game with me. Everything is opposite. It takes a whole different way, constantly changing, adapting, experimenting, and high risk. You know, it's diametrically opposed. So what happens with publicly traded companies when they have a bad quarter? They're doing both. They have a bad quarter. What's the natural reaction? What happens? What does the management team do? We cut everything on the innovation side and put it all back on the short term, and we're just propagating your demise faster. And the point to be made is you really need to have them both. Walt Disney and Roy Disney is a great example. Walt Disney was a pure creative. Oh my God, Roy, I've got 26 cartoon ideas I want to deploy. And Roy says, that's great, Walt, we got enough money for one. Pick one. Thank God he picked the mouse, and the rest is history, right? But you know, this is the yin and yang of what organizations need to have in order to be successful. So let's talk about innovation and some of the best practices. I love this quote from Arthur C. Clarke. He says, new ideas pass through 3 periods. 1, it can't be done. 2, it probably can be done, but it's really not worth doing. Or number 3, I knew it was a good idea all along. How many of you have witnessed these 3 steps? You know, no one ever starts with 3. And the thing I always talk about innovation is that it's really complicated when you talk about innovation. It's such a necessary thing, but it is so hard to do. So there's a good friend of mine by the name of Brett Trusk who works at the International Association of Innovation Professionals. So the task this young man has taken on is that he wants to be able to offer a certified degree in innovation. Right? That's pretty cool. So they've had to kind of figure out what the pedagogy is in order to do this. Look at what it looks like. Look at what it looks like. Measurement, opportunity identification, architecture, idea generation, value creation. And so when I talk to organizations, they're doing innovation, but they'll say, we're doing innovation, but it's usually a very small subset of this, right? This is what I hear over and over. I hang out with a lot of C-suite CEOs, and I always ask them the question, is innovation important to you? And the answer is yes. It's one of our top priorities, top 3. And then I ask the second question, which is, are you good at innovation? What do you think they say? Yeah, we're good at innovation. We're innovative. And then the third question, which is really eye-opening, is I say, do you have any structured approach to innovation? And they look at me and say, I don't really know the question. Right? I conclude very quickly that if you're not have a structured approach on how you're addressing innovation, you're not really innovative. You're doing maybe some innovative things, but as an organization, you don't have the DNA to be innovative. So I begin to look at this and say, what are some of the things to look at? And the first thing I would tell you is, how do you define innovation? Right? I did a little exercise inside my company. I went to all my peers. There's about 28 of us. And I asked them all, I said, hey, what's your definition of innovation? And they all told me. And in one of our meetings where we all come together, I put up the definition. Would you believe none of them were the same? You know, so one of the first things you need to do if you want to build an innovative organization is, what the heck does innovation mean? What is the definition of innovation? What do you think is the definition of innovation? What do you think it is? Come on, you ate dessert. The sugar's kicking in right now. I know the creativity's coming. Creation of something new and novel. Very good start. What else? Creating value. Oh, I love the value word, the big V word. Yay, value. And for your customers, you've defined who it is. What else?
Solving a problem.
What is it?
Solving a problem.
Solving a problem. What else?
Taking a new approach to an old problem you already solved.
Taking an old approach to a new approach to an old problem you already solved. So you're kind of optimizing maybe what you did before. So I don't know about you, but I like things simple. Creation, delivery of new customer value in the marketplace with a sustainable business model. This may not work for you, but it's easy. I did a contest with some people on my team saying, hey, define innovation. Some of them went on for like 4 paragraphs. I said, wait a minute, you got to implement it, right? You know, so people can read this and go, okay, it's all around driving new customer value. It's got to be in the marketplace, and then on top of that, it's got to be sustainable. It's got to be a good business model. So figure out what it is, but you should be defining innovation and what it means in the organization. The second thing on innovation is you have to have a process for it. And this is kind of how the process works in most places. You do a bunch of stuff and you hope that a miracle happens, you know, and that doesn't work, right? So the way to think about innovation is that successful innovation is not the result of luck or some sort of lone genius, but it's really a discipline. You got to approach it with a very disciplined approach of what you want to do. It's got to be treated as a subject that you systematically understand, you teach it, step by step, you start with individuals, you take it to their teams, and ultimately it works its way into the DNA. Here's something for you to think about for a moment. Name one thing that your organization that you work for is really, really good at across the entire company, and that is done without a process or without training? Can anybody come up with one thing that your organization is really good at systematically across the thing without training and without having a process? Patient care. Well, that's kind of your job, right? You know? The point to be made, anything that you want it to be repeatable has to be treated with some sort of discipline, and you got to train. Let me hit the strategy piece. When I began to attack innovation inside the company, and by the way, we're highly innovative as a company, but we created, first of all, we needed to have the top commitment from our leaders, from our CEO and the rest of, we committed to this, yeah. Okay, so what are the metrics and incentives we're going to measure, right? What's the innovation portfolio? What do we have in our kit that we can recombine and reuse? Are there principles for how we're going to manage the portfolio? How do I start to promote a culture of innovation inside the company? Every single talk that was given by any one of our executives, we're talking about innovation, right? And we began to then put the tools in place and teach it, but very systematically driving some sort of strategy on how you get there. Teaching people. We created a university called the Innovation Academy, and you go in there and you click on. I mean, it's pretty good. We have 72,000 employees. We've had 14,000 people that have gone through some level of training. The average time on the site is about 42 minutes. Pretty good for any people that are doing the web stuff in the room. Very well received. And then we're taking the time also to teach our leaders, how to generate innovative business ideas. How do you, basically find innovative people in the organization stuff. You got to treat it differently. We're layering it differently at the individual contributor and the leaders. And all of this leads to really having the right process. The other one that's quite interesting is experience and culture. Anybody know who that handsome guy on the left-hand side of the screen with the white hair? No, not me, the other one. Who is it? No, not Andy Williams. Good try. Anybody know? That is A.G. Lafley, the CEO of Procter & Gamble, one of the foremost innovators of our time, and he's not a born innovator. So I had the privilege of interviewing him at Cisco Live last year in front of thousands of people. Riveting interview on his part. And I asked him the last question. I said, A.G., what keeps you up at night? And it took him a minute for him to respond. And I thought, at his age and my age, I'm looking, I'm going, you having a stroke, man? Are you okay? Are you with me? Are you with me? And he finally, he looked at me and goes, I'm okay, I'm just thinking, right? So he goes, Carlos, what keeps me up at night, he said, my 40 years of experience in success in the consumer packaged good industry will make me see new problems in the new world in an old way. He sucked the air out of the room. You could hear a pin drop. So I said to him, I lied to you. I know I told you that was the last question. No, I have one more. What do you do about it? He says, well, that's a good question. He says, every time I'm making a big decision, not a day-to-day one, a big one, that's going to have a big impact on the company, and I know the answer right away because I've seen it before, I take a 48-hour break. I get the smartest people to look at it and making sure that it's the same thing. And what I'm finding is that about 15-20% of the time, it's a totally different problem. And if I would have done what my instinct and my history had taught me, I would have done the wrong thing. Very powerful words for all of us from a cultural perspective. Focus on the innovation, make it a discipline. That's the biggest message there. So let's kind of have a little bit of fun in the last time that I have here, really talk about some technologies and trends to watch. And I just want to reiterate a couple of things. Number one is to survive, have success and longevity really is mandatory to have an understanding of the environment you're serving. Who are your customers? What are their expectations? How's it changing? Right? And if you're not delivering value into the marketplace and with a sustainable business model, you're not going to survive. But you got to question that all the time. So one of the biggest skills you need to have is this sensing of what's happening, digesting and taking time to think about all the data that you do collect, and then being adaptable. It's a very simple process. It's 1, 2, 3. So the question I have for you from a building perspective and sensing is really you need to be able to see the future. How many of you think you can predict the future? Raise your hand. That it's possible to do it? No one. A couple. Okay, good. I missed you. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I missed you. He raised his hand. Yes. He's angry because I didn't see him that he missed. He could predict the future. So what I want to show you is a video from Arthur C. Clarke predicting the future in 1964, what our world was going to look like in the year 2000. And this is quite interesting.
But what about the city of the day after tomorrow, say the year 2000? I think it will be completely different. In fact, it may not even exist at all. Oh, I'm not thinking of the atom bomb and the next Stone Age. I'm thinking of the incredible breakthrough which has been made possible by developments in communications, particularly the transistor and, above all, the communications satellite. These things will make possible a world in which we can be in instant contact with each other, wherever we may be, where we can contact our friends anywhere on Earth, even if we don't know their actual physical location. It will be possible in that age, perhaps only 50 years from now, for a man to conduct his business from Tahiti or Bali just as well as he could from London. In fact, if it proves worthwhile, almost any executive skill, any administrative skill, even any physical skill, could be made independent of distance. I am perfectly serious when I suggest that one day we may have brain surgeons in Edinburgh operating on patients in New Zealand. When that time comes, the whole world will have shrunk to a point, and the traditional role of the city as a meeting place for man would have ceased to make any sense. In fact, men will no longer commute, they will communicate. They won't have to travel for business anymore, they'll only travel for pleasure.
What do you think about that? Yeah, well, 1964, you know, different time. Everyone know who Arthur C. Clarke is? Who's Arthur C. Clarke? He's an author or a scientist. What did he write that we all know? 2001: A Space Odyssey, right? He got that nailed down. So you can say he's a very special guy that was able to predict that far into the future and get it right. So another guy, Ray Kurzweil, another guy that I had the privilege of spending a couple of days with this past year during Cisco Live. And he's one of the few guys that I have spent time with that, I mean, I normally meet people and I go, wow, he's really bright. When I spend time with Ray, he's so bright that I started feeling, man, I'm really stupid. You know, that's how smart this guy is. You start kind of going like, woo, you know, I don't understand every other word he says, you know, that kind of stuff. But here's something. He's right 86% of the time. And if you don't believe him, there's a 186-page PowerPoint deck on the internet with every single prediction that he's made out 30 years out and what has come true and what has not. And by the way, if you look at his 14% that he has gotten incorrectly, a large percentage of them had nothing to do with technology. The technology was available. It had to do everything with adoption and laws. Right? So if you take that into consideration, he's probably in the 97% range on accuracy. Really, really bright. Now, I couldn't have the opportunity to talk to Arthur C. Clarke and say, how do you do it? Right? But you know, it's like a kid in a candy store with a magician. You know, how does a trick work? You know, how do you do this, Ray? And he came back and he says, look, I do three things. First thing is I understand this concept of exponential, which I'm going to unpack for you in a moment. He says I track trends and I track technology. When I do those three things, I kind of can see what's going to happen. And if you think about this conference and the agenda that I saw and the stuff that you're publicizing, you're kind of doing a lot of this stuff already, maybe with the exception of exponential. So let's talk about exponential. Exponential, according to Al Bartlett, professor at university, I love this quote, the greatest shortcoming of the human race is our inability to understand the exponential function. And we all know, you know, linear goes this way, exponential goes like that, where you're doubling every single time. I mean, there's a vast outcome, you know, over a couple of clicks of where you are exponentially and where you are on a linear basis. Now, let's take a model that just to bring this to life, right? Because that, you know, chart like that means nothing. So this is basically, you know, processor performance. You can call it Moore's law, but you can see it's on an exponential curve increasing. So let me put this in a context that you can relate to it. In 1969, how many of you saw Neil Armstrong walk on the moon? Right? You had to be old like me. So if you take all the computing power on that lunar module that landed on the moon, you take all the computing power on the commander module that flew around and got him there, and you take all the computing power in Johnson Space Center, and you add it all up together, it's equivalent to a Game Boy in the year 2000. That's the difference between linear and exponential, right? Vast, vast difference. And the way to start thinking about it, Ray wrote a paper, and you should look this up, called The Law of Accelerating Returns. It basically analyzes the history of technology for the last 100 years, and actually even longer, and it has a very predictable curve, right? And the curve goes that information technology of all kinds double their power about price, performance, capacity, and bandwidth every year. This is, you can map it out. And what this really does that's really, really powerful, it gives you insight on what's going to be possible when. Because if you look at things today and you say, well, I wish the world could do this, and you say, well, there's not enough bandwidth to do that, or there's not enough computing power, or the cost is too much. If you do this exercise, you can say in 5 years it will be possible. Right? That's the way you got to think of it. It gives you that time horizon. Kodak got this wrong. Kodak invented digital photography. And when digital photography surpassed or started to become a big number, it started to impact their traditional photographic business with chemicals and paper and all the things that they did. So the board got together and made a decision to exit from digital. And their logic behind it was that the quality of digital is not and will never be as good as photographic paper. They didn't understand the law of accelerating returns. And what has happened is as soon as they got out of it, the R&D function that was going into digital increased tenfold because every camera manufacturer thought that they didn't have a shot at digital and they were scared to death. When Kodak exits, they're going, oh my God, this is great. Boom, let's put a lot of money in it. And it just accelerated everything to happen. Right? So this is really important to understand. Then the other two things is tracking trends in technology. We at Cisco have this thing called a technology radar. And it's a crowdsourced model. So we allow anyone in the company to say, hey, there's a technology we should track. And what we end up doing is say, great, we review it. Yeah, it sounds pretty cool. You're now responsible for every 30 days updating it. So I go on this thing on a pretty regular basis. OK, what's happening in all these things? This is in my wheelhouse. So the company tracks this. What I tend to track are things that are riding the exponential curve. And there's a lot of things. You've talked of a few of them today. But sensors and robotics and 3D printing, synthetic bio, all of these things are really critical. And the way these things evolve are very interesting. They evolve independently here, and then they converge. And when they converge is when the world changes in a way that we could never imagine. What's a converged product that came out in 2007 that changed everything? The iPhone. Not this big brick, but the iPhone, right? The technologies all existed. It was nothing new. Steve was brilliant in repackaging it in a way that really brought extra value. Convergence changes the game. So there's a lot of technologies and trends to watch. There's no way in heck we can pick them all and try to do anything here. So I picked some obscure ones and some that are kind of in our wheelhouse just to talk about. So the one thing that we're very big on is this notion of the Internet of Everything, where sensors are going to be everywhere. Right? The way we kind of think about it is that there'll be people connected with sensors. I have one there. I have a strip in my here. This is you wear it. It does a full medical grade, FDA approved EKG, and about 8 other things just by wearing a strip that streams to your mobile phone, and that goes onto the internet, right? And your doctor can see it. But people are connecting. Then we have things that are connecting. There's going to be cars and stoplights and buildings and all of these things. All of these connections are generating huge amounts of data. Notice how I didn't say information. It's data because it's just zeros and ones. And then we need to put it through a process to extract some value. And the two things that come out of it is either it's going to serve, that knowledge is going to serve to optimize the business, or it's going to help you make some money through knowledge. And ultimately, you're really focused, like you are in healthcare, and changing outcomes. It's about improving efficiency, customer service, driving new products or services. And that's kind of the way it's going. In the healthcare space, we've got a big challenge with people my age that are going to continually increase, and it's a very large population. So we need to figure out how to do it differently. We've seen taking pills being a challenge. There's a lot of research now on monitoring whether the folks are taking their medications. There's a lot of research being done on monitoring movement. If you don't put your slippers on every day and move at a certain time, there's a problem. So very, very simple sensor technology in doing those kinds of things. There's I showed you that FDA approved. The other movement that is kind of interesting and yet scary in some ways is this whole notion of diagnosis and where it's going, right? You know, you got Walmart now, you know, advertising quality healthcare doesn't have to cost a fortune. They're trying to make it a cost game. You're in shopping for diapers, why don't you come in and, you know, get your flu shot, come in and, you know, get checked out, you know, and depending on, I mean, you're not going to have a surgery at Walmart, I hope you don't. But, you know, it's kind of interesting how they could begin to take a different portion of the business. You got the wearable stuff we're all wearing for, you know, now it's fun, but as you start getting more sophisticated and you have millions of people wearing them, you know, the insights that this will provide is quite interesting. My friend Peter Diamandis from XPRIZE has a challenge out there. There's 10 million people, I'm sorry, a $10 million prize working for whoever comes up with the Star Trek tricorder, a self-diagnosing kind of tool. And if you think this isn't going to happen, look at the crowdsourcing. There's 330 teams working on this from 33 nations. So they're going to come up with something, right? And as a matter of fact, if you think that's too far out there, there's products like Scanadu. Everyone familiar with Scanadu? Right? Scanadu is this device that's supposed to be out next year, if it is or not, but you put it on your forehead and it analyzes like 14 different dimensions and tries to give you a little bit of insight of what may be going on. Here's the future of how they see it. Let me play this video.
Technology has given us an unprecedented window into the human body. But on a day-to-day basis, we're still in the dark about our own health. We are changing that. What if instead of fearing the worst when you notice something out of the ordinary, you could identify the condition yourself? Getting the right diagnosis would save you worry.
It says it's roseola.
And an unnecessary doctor's visit.
Rest at home, it's okay.
Instead of hearing about a viral outbreak on the news, imagine you got an alert that was tailored to your family's needs. It would also give you advice about what to do next. What if you had a way to identify what was wrong right away?
It says it's 103.8.
A way to get all of the information you need to understand the situation. And in serious cases, you would know when and where to seek help.
It recommends taking it to the urgent care.
We're building a way for people to check their bodies as often as they check their email. It's all possible, and it's only the beginning.
It's a vision piece. It's not real, so don't get scared. But it begins to give you some of the insight. You take this technology, connect it up to the cloud with Watson on the back end of it. There's some really interesting things that could come out of it. And the interesting thing is the business model disruptions. Who are you going to trust, right? So we got to begin to think about these things in a way on how to address it. Lighting, one of the most fascinating pieces of all. You know, I just spent some time with a small company called Lighting Sciences. And it's amazing how much health-related things are related to light. So the evolution of digital, and normally happens in phase 1, is they went from an inefficient model of fluorescent and incandescent bulbs into an LED bulb, so we save energy. Phase 2 is around connecting it to the internet, so now you can control, turn it on and off, change color. Third phase is to use it to really reinvent things. So a couple of things, right, on sleep deficiency, on nighttime lighting and all these things, you know, we are very susceptible to the spectrum and for health reasons. And they're doing a lot of studies on, you know, on a number of different production of neurotransmitters and a variety of other things that your body produces depending on exposure to different spectrum. They're doing things with exercise and light treatment for obesity and a lot of other drugs. There's hundreds of these reports. I haven't kind of gone through all of them, but there's a tremendous impact on lighting. One of the interesting places, I visited Nemours Children's Hospital in Lake Nona I don't know how many of you have been there or not, but they're applying lighting and design in a totally different way. And this is a children's hospital. Look at their spaces, how cool they look, and everything is lit. The kids' rooms are ginormous, and they control the lighting in the room. They have a button to change colors and create things and do a whole bunch of things, right? So lighting applied in the right way could be a differentiator. And you know, again, I'm not the expert on the health benefits, but there's a lot of really good research. Augmented reality. How many of you are familiar with VR and virtual reality? Has anybody gone to a VR lab? Raise your hand. So let me share with you a really interesting, this is at the Stanford Research Lab. And I got to tell you the story here is they tell me before I went into the lab that if I use recycled toilet tissue, I would save 2 trees in my lifetime. A very random act. And I'm like, yeah, okay, shoot, cool. I'm thinking, boy, this is a painful commitment, you know. So I get in the VR lab, and they fire me up, and I start cutting trees. Turn a little bit of the audio up. So here I am in a virtual space. It doesn't look really cool, but when you got the thing, you really feel like you're in a forest. Here it is. It's falling down, you know, and I did it. So I get back. So I get back into the room, and this very pregnant woman is bringing us a pitcher of water, and she drops the pitcher of water on the floor. And of course, the 3 of us that were in the room get up right away, and you know, we start picking it up. And there was a thing of napkins right on the table. And as soon as we're done and we sit down and go, are you okay? Yeah, everything's cool. The researcher comes in and goes, okay, measuring how many paper towels. And they ask me a question. He goes, how many times, Carlos, you went to the sink 14 times to wring that paper towel. Why did you do that? And I said, I don't know. And there's this incredible connection with what happens to you in a virtual environment and the impact it has on the physical space. So the implications for that are quite huge, right? Because our body didn't, you know, they do this pit thing too. You walk this plank, and then they remove the floor. And your heart rate goes to, you know, skyrocket, your blood pressure goes, and they tell you jump off the plank, and you go, no. And you know it's not real, yet you won't do it, right? These things are very, very impactful. And you know, they're using it for more complex tasks. This is repairing a car, but you can see someday a doctor wearing augmented reality glasses, and you know, the glasses with Watson and a bunch of other things are guiding them through, you know, how to do a surgery or some complex procedure that they didn't know how to do before. All of these are possible. The other one is avatars. You know, it's gone from, you know, a cartoon to current technology that's gotten much better to having a virtual assistant. And, you know, this is really applicable when pre-survey of talking to a doctor. What they've done at MIT, which I'm sure Nicholas probably spoke about, is they found that people will tell more things to a virtual agent about their conditions than they would to a real person, because they might be embarrassed, but they want to tell it. And there's new technology created by companies like LA Noire. This is a gaming company. What I want you to see is the real-time creation of the avatar. He's speaking there with cameras, and look at what's being created. So we're at a point now where, you know, we can create avatars that look and sound like you very, very quickly. By the way, that's 5 years old. There's a company, Merrill, who's having a hard time getting young people to invest in their future. So they've got a program. You can go online, and it ages you to 65 and tells you all the things that will happen if you don't save, right? And here's the punchline. I went in there, I try to age myself, and I keep crashing the system. You can't start when you're freaking old already. You know, you can't do it. And let me finish on this trend. I started with big data and analytics, but this is where I think there's the most hope, and I think the greatest opportunity for all of us. This is a chart that came out of the JAMA in, I think it was May of 2014. And this is all the places that data can come from. And the punchline is we're using this much of it. There was a way to extract it, capture it, analyze it, and apply analytics to it. The insights that we would have would be incredible. So what I want to do is I want to share with you, it's a 3-minute film, but it really brings to life big data, and in a way that's a pediatric example. And Rick Smolin, who did this book, is a dear friend of mine, and actually Cisco funded the movie that is going to be coming out on PBS hopefully within the next 30 days. And I think it's a pretty moving story, and it kind of brings to life the big data.
A lot of people don't realise that when a baby is born premature, it can develop infection in the hospital and it can kill them. In our research, we started to just look at infection. By the time the baby is physically showing signs of having infection, they are very, very unwell. So the very first time that I went into a neonatal intensive care unit, I was amazed by the sights, the sound, the smell, just the whole environment, but mainly for me, the data. What shocked me was the amount of data loss. They showed me the paper chart that the information's recorded onto. One number every hour for the baby's heart rate, the respiration, the blood oxygen. Now in that time, the baby's heart has beaten more than 7,000 times. They've breathed more than 2,000 times, and the monitor showing the blood oxygen level has showed that more than 3,500 times. I said, well, where's all the data going that's in those machines? And they said, oh, it scrolls out of memory. So we have an enormous amount of data loss. So we're trying to gather that information and use it over a longer time in much more complex ways than before. And we try and write computing code to look at the trends in the monitors and the trends in the data to see how that can tell us when a baby's becoming unwell.
So Dr. McGregor did what data scientists do. She looked for the invisible. She and her team analyzed the data from thousands of heartbeats, and what they discovered were minute fluctuations that could predict the onset of life-threatening infections long before physical symptoms appeared.
When the body first starts dealing with infection, there are these subtle changes, and that's why we have to watch every single heartbeat. And what we're finding is that when you're starting to become unwell, the heart's ability to react, to speed up and slow down, gets subdued. The human body has always been exhibiting these certain things. The difference is we've started to gather more information about the body now so that we can build this virtual person. The better we have the virtual representation, then the better we can start to understand what will happen to them in the future. Back in 1999, I was pregnant with my first child. She was born premature and she passed away. There was no other viable outcome for her. But there are so many others who have just been born early and they just need that opportunity to grow and develop. We want to let the computers monitor a baby as it breathes, as its heart beats, as it sleeps, so that these algorithms are watching for certain behaviours. And if something starts to go wrong for that baby, we have the ability to intervene. If we can just save one life, then for me personally, it's already worthwhile.
Goes to show you. I mean, I get choked up, you know, in seeing things like this, because the potential for us to really change outcomes and really produce in a way that that changes the game is going to be through things like that. My closing thought, and my alarm is just going off, reminding me that I've hit my timer of 45 minutes, is I'll begin and end in the same way. I hope you really feel it's an amazing time to be alive, because it really is. And I think what's in store for us over the next 15, 20, 30 years are going to be mind-bending. The problem that I see is that these technologies are going to push the limits of ethics. It's going to push the limits of right and wrong. And the decisions for these things can't be made by a select few. It's got to be made by the collective. And yet, maybe in this room, we're the exception, but in most organizations that I go talk to, people have no idea of the things that are happening with regenerative medicine and synthetic biology and genomics and proteomics and all these other things. They're going to push the limits. So if you're already engaged, become an advocate, become a voice to let people know what's going on, because I am a firm believer we'll get it right as a group. If you're not engaged, make it a point to really begin to understand it. I can't thank you enough for your time, and an honor and a privilege to have been able to serve and speak to you today. Thank you.